Hi, I'm Sean Irvin, the Sioux Falls Planning Commission Chair. We're here for planning preview of the upcoming meeting that we've got on Thursday, July 5th. A different day than usual for our weekly or monthly meetings, just due to the holiday. I've got with me today Jeff Schmidt with the Sioux Falls Planning and Zoning Department.
Hello.
Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Did you have fun on your vacation?
Yes, we did. Yes, it was very nice. And now we're back home.
Very good. Excellent. Into the wet Midwest.
Yes. Seasonal.
Very true, very true. Well, I see the first item on our agenda looks like it's a C2 commercial shifting over to an S1 general institutional. This is at 401 South Joliet Avenue. I believe that's just a few blocks east of Sycamore and just north of Arrowhead Parkway, right?
Correct. We have quite a few rezonings this month that are going to Planning Commission, and then Planning Commission will make these recommendations to go forward to City Council. And with these rezonings, again, Planning Commission basically decides yes or no. So this first one, it's already commercial, and they're requesting to go to S1, and so Planning Commission can say, we want it to stay commercial, or do you want it to go S1? The request is really for a height issue. They can do what they would like to do with this building in commercial. It's going to be a rec facility. They want to do a rock climbing wall, an amusement area type of thing, but they can't get the height that they need in this building in their commercial zoning district. So they need to zone it to S1, which also allows amusement areas, institutional uses, but they need the height. So they'll propose it to the Planning Commission. Planning Commission can decide if it's appropriate in this neighborhood and then send it to City Council.
Just out of interest, how tall are they asking to go for this? Do you remember?
It's a You're the expert. It's not a sloped roof, but there's more to a pitch to it, and then there's another parapet down here. So overall, I mean, we won't average it, but I think the overall height, I think, is about 50 feet.
Okay.
So down here, the main building's 30 feet, but that higher
the
part,
projection for the high spot
for the height
really
spot is
high,
about
sure.
50 feet.
Okay, that makes sense.
And again, it's not 50 all over, so it wouldn't be this great big massing, but it sits at a different elevation.
Sure, good to know. Thank you. Next item, actually, it looks like the next 5 or so are shifts from various zones over to conservation district things, probably for things like water detention, things like that, I imagine. The next one we'll talk about is at 6th Street and Cleveland, and let's see, at the southeast corner.
Speaking of water conservation, right?
Yes.
So the planning staff, when we did this in 2013 and 2014, one of the things that we talked to the citizens about, City Council about, the mayor about, was we really wanted the zoning to match up with what the land was. So that citizens and property owners really understood what the land was being used for. So this first one, it's zoned RA2 apartments, but this land isn't being used for apartments. It's being used as a retention pond. It's their drainage pond. It's where the water that's being held for the apartments, when the water, snow melt, rainfall comes off of the site, it goes into this piece of ground that's being used for drainage. So shouldn't it then be zoned for conservation so that people can look at a map, know what's next to them, and they go, so is it really apartments? No, that piece of ground is actually conservation. It's for detention, retention for snow melt, rainfall. That's what it's going to be used for.
Natural uses.
Natural uses. Because
Sure.
there is, thanks, that's a great clarification. It could be REC, recreation, or it's conservation. There's two, but this is strictly conservation.
Okay.
Yep.
Good to know. Let's see, looks like the next one, similar, but
Yes.
this one's at Southeastern and 41st. That must be across from Avera Fitness, I'm guessing.
That's correct. And again, same understanding. When these sites get built out, when they get developed, when there's these pieces left over, we've tried to work with the property owners, the developers, and say, look, this is really the parcel that's being used for conservation for drainage. Let's make sure it's being shown appropriately on the map. Summer's a good time to go in there and have the public hearings and give the notice. And so then we send them out to the property owners that are adjacent to let the people know it's being rezoned. Not going to be single family, it's going to be conservation. Doesn't really change anything from what's out there. So when property owners see this, if they received a notice, we get a lot of phone calls. What's going on? There's this pond next to us and now we're getting notice that it's going to be changed. We're like, it's not being changed, it's going to be used as it is.
Yeah, it's really aligning, and really I think a lot of these are city initiated, just saying, hey, let's try to really represent what's correctly there. Correct. And just let everybody be able to see it on the map,
yes.
right?
Yes,
okay.
Yep.
Nope, that makes a lot of sense. Let's see, next one, very similar again, moving from C3 commercial to that CN Conservation District, is at Westport Avenue and 10th. That must be right by the fairgrounds, I'm
Correct.
guessing. Okay.
Way over on the west side of town, commercial property, but it's really for the detention pond that's being used there now, and so getting it to show appropriately on the maps.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. And then let's see, another one of those from RS Single Family to Conservation District at Bonson and Broken Arrow Street. That must be a little ways north of Oakview Library. That's kind of back in a residential area.
That's correct. And again, right now it's residential. It shows up as residential because there's a lot of residential up there. But when those residential properties do have land that drains off, this is really the conservation property that's storing the drainage.
Mm-hmm. Okay, makes sense. Let's see, and the next one we've got is shifting from a C2 commercial to a CN Conservation District by Highline and Arrowhead. I'm guessing that's right near the East Side Menards.
It's by the East Side Menards. Same as all the other ones. This was an area that had manufactured homes or single family homes. It's not being necessarily used for that. The Menards area, all those retail shops in the front is the C2, so there we're changing it back to what's being used on the ground is the CN conservation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, makes sense. Let's see, next one is not similar to that one. It's changing from conservation to rec.
Yes.
Very similar to what we just talked about
Correct.
a few items ago at 69th and Greystone, so that must be right near Harrisburg's Horizon Elementary,
Yes.
I'm guessing.
Yes.
Okay.
And again, if citizens are just tuning in to planning preview right now, there are two different types. Conservation is conserving the property. Recreation allows more active uses on the property. Passive, active. So this property is currently a drainage pond. It retains all the water. It's for snow melt. It's everything that we've just talked about. It's an area that has a lot of housing down there. But at the same time, as they enter into this area, they would like to put a gazebo or a picnic bench at the entranceway so that people that live down there in the apartments in the housing area can come and sit and look at the drainage. And so us being sticklers for what we're like, well, that's not really conservation, that's more recreation. And so they're like, so you're gonna make us change? We're like, we're gonna make you change it. So it's gonna be changed to recreation. It's not a soccer field, it's not a football, it's just they can put a shelter there, so maybe even a seat, so that people can sit there and look at the pond.
Well, and we know how that works. Usually, you know, they put up a structure, a property owner might do that, and then they say, well, really, we'd like to sidewalk there to make sure people don't walk through the mud to get there. And it slowly develops to be a little more activity, and then it starts to get farther and farther away from that original conservation. So it makes sense to make the shift as soon as there's that first placement, right?
Really trying to just describe what's on the ground, what the land uses are. That's what planning staff works with the commission on during the public hearings to say what is there.
Right, right. Makes sense. Looks like our next item is shifting from an RA2 apartment to a RD1 twin home duplex and RS single family, kind of a couple of different things. I'm not real familiar with this place of North Nob Hill Court.
Northwest.
Okay.
Benson Road. and Marion Road. Hazeltine subdivision, they're building single-family homes and twin homes up there. The market's very good for that right now. They have this piece of ground that is apartments that they could build apartments on, but their single-family market's doing really well. Their townhome market's doing very well. And so they need to subdivide this one parcel out of that and zone it into the twin home single-family market.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense, because there's so many times where we as a commission are looking at things, trying to make sure that transition is right and it's not too abrupt between two different things. And so this kind of thing will make a lot of sense to make sure that there's some continuity in the neighborhood and it's not too quick of a change between things. So that'll make great sense. Let's see, next item is rezone from a C2 commercial neighborhood streetcar to C3 commercial for 7201 South Cliff. That must be near the USF Sports Complex, I'm guessing?
Correct, but on the other side.
Okay.
It's on the west side. And so C2 and C3 are different size commercials. And so this is another recreation facility. Not that we can hold them to that, but they can't build the structure size that they want in C2. In C3, the size is more appropriate. So we're going to request that in a C3, they build the right size structure, and they want to build a recreation facility for a sports facility.
Okay.
So.
Okay. And then is that USF or is it?
No, it's a private facility.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
Just curious. Let's see, next item is a shift from a S1 general institutional to an RA2 apartment residential at 6300 West 41st. I'm guessing, is this Christian Center School right near Roosevelt High School?
Correct, and Keene Park and the water towers. So it's all S1 now because it's this large campus facility that has the church and the school, but they've really, because of changing enrollments, had to downsize their campus recently. And people understand that. They would like to build apartments on their remaining piece right now and meet a growing affordability need in this community. And so they're asking to take a portion of their land and build some apartments on it, and still then benefit with the church, Keene Park, Roosevelt, the pool, the golf course, and get some affordability of apartments in there.
So again, we'll start considering how those transitions work as we look at this item for the upcoming meeting.
Yes.
Sure. Let's see, next one is from an RS single family to RT1 single family traditional at 1246 East 21st Street. So that must be right near Avera's main campus somewhere?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And we do these, I was going to say once a month, but frequently. Maybe every other month you see these on planning commissions where we're going to residential traditional lots. We zoned them RS because they're residential single family, but some of them are so small, it's back to the old 1920s, 1930s, 1940 lots, where the lots were so small, they're more traditional, and they can't meet the same standards to build a single-family home. So we work with the property owner, who this is, the property owner, he wants to build a single-family home, so we rezone it with that property owner to residential traditional, and the setbacks are a little bit different. They can build a single-family home the way they used to back in the day.
So likely this is like a 40 or 50 foot wide lot.
Correct. Not an 80 by 100. It's more 40 by 50.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. Let's see. Next one is from Ag to RS single family at 95th and South Louise. This must be west of the Endeavor Elementary for Harrisburg?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. And way south on Louise, obviously, 95th Street in Louise, and a church wants to go here. Okay. So they're taking an ag piece to residential single family. But again, always try to explain to citizens and stakeholders that watch this, we're not zoning it to a church. We rezone it to RS single family, and then there's a list of things in residential single family that you can do, including churches, because they're part of a neighborhood. So that's what they'd like to do. At the same time, they could do single family homes in this if we rezone it to single family. If you don't support it, they can do ag, which is agricultural, crop
Right.
land, livestock. That's what they can do there now. Is it more appropriate to do RS? Yep.
Yep, it would seem to make sense. We'll talk about that more, I'm sure. Let's see, next one is an alternative site plan for an alternative buffer yard at 41st and Sertoma. So this must be near, is there an apartment complex in that general area? Or
To the west.
I can't remember that area very well.
To the
Okay.
west. We had the next two, these are ones that we had on last month, but the applicants weren't there, so we're redoing them again. And this alternative plan is on the northwest corner of 41st and Sertoma. They're building 2 retail commercial strips, and they're going to put in a couple tenants, a couple drive-throughs. But with this one, why it's an alternative plan is next to the fence, next to the single family, there's already landscaping and large evergreen trees. And so they want to retain those and keep those on site. If they needed to meet our standards, which our standards are pretty plain. Here's the vacant site, here's the tabletop, and we want to berm in and trees. So we start from nothing. They would have to tear out their berm and tear out their evergreens and put in a berm and put in trees.
To meet the specifications
Of our
those
standard,
requirements.
correct.
Sure,
And they're
sure.
like, so you want us to tear it out and rebuild it? And we're like, no, we'd rather you keep what you have.
Keep the mature trees.
Yes, which have
and
been there for 30 years.
Right, and we don't want to, we want to just tweak that so it respects the neighbors and
Yes.
don't do all those things,
That's
but really
what
retain what
That's
makes
what
sense.
an alternative plan is, and let them look at what do they have there already.
Sure, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Let's see, and looks like our last one is a conditional use permit for on-sale alcohol at 1821 West 12th. This must be near ABC Rentals, I'm guessing?
Correct.
Okay.
On the southeast corner of the site, and there's already a on-sale alcohol beverage establishment there. They want to open another one at that facility. So we need to have a conditional use to see if there's any conditions that Planning Commission needs to place on this use.
Okay, makes sense.
Yep.
Let's see, I think I'd like to just talk about one thing that, with all this rain we've
Yes.
been getting in the last 2 days, it seems like there's always concerns about our property owners doing enough to manage their stormwater.
Right.
We hear that question a lot during Planning Commission and people saying that that's a concern of theirs as this change in zoning happens.
Correct.
I know the city does a really thorough job of reviewing how that runoff works with the rest of the system and the intake systems and all of those kinds of things. But it always starts with what goes across the property line, right?
Yes.
Could you talk just a little bit about some of those requirements and how we, how the city really makes sure that everybody that's doing a new development makes sure that their neighbors are protected as the default position, right?
Certainly. Where we really start is we have a public works department and we have drainage engineers that look at every site plan and every development that comes to the city. And we have standards that have to be met through engineering design standards for every site that's being developed in the city of Sioux Falls. Those standards get approved through boards and commissions and then through city council. And then when a plan comes through, it gets reviewed and it has to be met. So when we get the Planning Commission, people bring it up and Planning Commission usually says, well, we're not going to look at that because that gets reviewed by somebody else. But in general, what we talk about is a site that hasn't been developed yet generally has water that comes off it. Rainfall comes down onto a farm, onto a piece of vacant property, and water can flow off of it. Now when you build something on it, a house or a large commercial site, you can't have any more water come off it than was on there before. I'm not a drainage engineer, I'm not an expert, but when I talk to people, I go, look at this table, and if you have a glass of, if water's going off it now, I can't pour a glass of water and have any more go off this table. I have to take care of it on this table, on this site.
Right.
Because right now, if you have a nice yard at a place, the water's going to soak in, it's going to go in, but if you inundate it, and make too much. You need to have these little ponds so that they can stay there and be retained or detained long enough for it to soak through and then slowly infiltrate into our drainage system down to the Big Sioux River and then flow through. You don't want it just to sheet flow and flood. So we have standards that look at all those things at every site, everywhere, to really take care of it. I think what people need to understand and realize is it's really hard to look at what the standards are and understand it, because again, these last 2 days, and again, we still haven't stopped yet, but is it a record rainfall? Is it so much? And they're like, yeah, but I had water in my site from that record rain. We don't really take care of record rainfalls. We take care of averages and how much we typically get, because if we had to design for everything, it would be really cost prohibitive. And in Sioux Falls, I think people, you don't park for Easter Sunday. People go to church every Sunday and you got enough parking, but then you get there for Easter Sunday and there's not enough parking. Well, should you have designed your parking lot for Easter Sunday or for every Sunday? Same thing with drainage. Drainage is fine 360 days a year, and then you get that one rainfall that you go, well.
Right. Well, and I think that's a lot of why Sioux Falls had the wisdom years ago to start having people move away from the river and make that into parks and non-essential kind of spaces, so that more and more we can take those big events that are unusual and they don't really affect anybody's specific house or hopefully travel through the city or things like that. There's times where there's a road near me that gets flooded, but it's only flooded for maybe an hour or two, and then it drains away because that's really how the design is set up. So I think that's a lot of why, you know, as we as planning commissioners look at things, we say we have a confidence that as they do their review, that the experts have really looked at it closely, make sure that the adjustments suggested aren't going to overburden the system. And so if it switches to a commercial lot, for example, that's going to be more parking lot, we know that, so it doesn't soak in like you talked about, but we know that the system can handle it, and that property owner is going to make sure that they either have detention or something else that's going to be the offsetting factor to make sure that that development isn't going to adversely affect all of their neighbors. Right?
Yes. Yeah. You know, and what Sean and I are saying, you know, on planning preview is just how we look at it. If any citizens really want more information, that's why we started with it's public works drainage. There's more information out there, but just an overview how planning looks at it from our standpoint is we have a comfort level that someone's looking at it.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I think, you know, as we think about all of those things, there's always a question about, well, does the city ever actually verify that things are built the way that the company or the homeowner or the property owner is going to build it? And I understand that absolutely they do. They walk out, they make sure that things are laid out the way that they intended to be, and so there is verification. And so, you know, I think me as a citizen, I like the fact that there is that secondary verification that things were done the way they're supposed to be.
You know, and the other thing I thought about too, and this is really kind of getting off subject, but if you're building a home or you're building a site, you can build your own development differently, better. You know, when you're building a home, you can say, yeah, those are the minimum standards, but I want a nicer home. I want a better home. And you can go above. You can build it a lot better. We just say, these are the minimum standards you have to meet. So if citizens go, yeah, I want to know what the minimum, but when I build my next house, I want 4 sump holes and I want a higher elevate, you're more than willing to do it better than we set the standards for.
Sure. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to this Planning Commission meeting. It should be a good one.
Yes.
But keep in mind, everybody that's planning to come, it's on Thursday, the 5th of July, so the day after Independence Day. So if you show up on Independence Day, the building will probably be locked. But we appreciate hearing public opinions. We encourage people to come out and speak about the particular item that you might be concerned with. We really like to hear those comments, and we're always trying to balance that neighbor input with the rights of the property owner, because really that's what the Planning Commission is about, is trying to make sure that the transitions between things are right, and that we're always careful to make sure that everybody's interests are protected as much as we possibly can.
Correct.
And with that, thank you for joining us for Planning Preview for July 5th Planning Commission.